I want to thank everybody that helped make this happen. Taji is going to have his own time to talk, but I just want to say that he is the most patient of artists.
A team of patience.
Yes, a team of patience.
Say thank you, water, because for always being there so we could drink you, and thank you for raining a lot.
Dublin, California sits where it does today because it's a historic crossroads with fresh water. Today the spring is still flowing and the 580 and 680 freeways cross there. It's still a crossroads with fresh water.
I always assumed that Dublin was one of the last cities on the scene here. And as I started looking through maps, I began to realize that this was indeed one of the first communities that developed here.
The spirit of Alameda Spring is a representation of the spirit of the spring in a feminine form. And she's skipping a stone across time, and each splash represents an era in the history of the city. Indigenous times, there was a freshwater spring there. Hunting trails, trading trails were certainly there. And when the Spanish missions arrived, they discovered those trails and they used them to travel between Mission San Jose and Martinez, and from Mission Dolores in San Francisco to the Sierra Nevada mountains. And then in the era of the Mexican territory, Jose Amador built his ranch house right next to the Alameda Spring. Then after the Mexican-American War, Dublin, California began to receive Irish immigrants from the Irish potato famine, and many Irish immigrants began to immigrate to Dublin. And the spring, still watering the people. The life-giving, healing waters of the Alameda Spring founded this city. During a drought, maybe the first place to go is gratitude for the water.
We were delighted to be invited by sculptor Toji Kurtzman to participate in the City of Dublin's Alamilla Spring Project to make visible the voices of 7 people.
For the artist as a community representative to make an offering of gratitude to the fountain source of the City of Dublin, California.
Here you see the Alamilla spring water being injected into the visualizing cell. When we inject the sound into the cymoscope, the phrase or single word becomes visible on the surface of the water.
I say thank you, water.
The first splash, indigenous people, the native people of this land.
When these words are uttered and said again into the existence and into reality,
then we heal each other and we heal our land. I'm grateful for the water, for giving us life. In Chochenyo, which is my heritage language, when we say hello, we say Huarshatuki, so Kanakrakat Vince Medina, I Koimak Peret Ka Manemakiswi. I said my name is Vince Medina, and welcome to our land where we are born. That's in our indigenous Chochenyo language, which is the oldest language recorded that's ever been spoken here in this area that we call the East Bay today. So I feel that especially with language, we reconnect with the truest sense of ourselves, and we reconnect with our ancestors, and we reconnect with our land by speaking our language. Chochenyo was one of the languages that had to be revitalized. So for about 70 years, we didn't have any first language speakers as a result of missionization, and especially with the fact that there was a gold rush genocide that occurred. And so as a result of that, many of the numbers of our speakers dwindled and dwindled until a point in the 1930s where there were just 2 speakers left. And those 2 speakers, they recorded as much as they could. And when the current revitalization of our language took place, we were able to relearn the language and share it back with our community. I'm grateful for the water, for giving us life.
And Grandma says, you know your eyes? You have your eyes because I'm the mother of your father, and you have your father's eyes. When you see this tree grown, I'll be seeing it through your eyes. So there's things like that. I know. I look at this place. I know my great-great-great-great-grandfather could have been on the work crew that put this altar together in 1797. And if he was a hard worker, he probably stood back and says, all right, I hope this thing stands up. And now I can imagine him looking at it through my eyes going, over there needs to be dusted. Over there needs a little bit more fresh paint. And just think, you know, there's that connection. And so when we look to the snow-capped mountains, we think of the wisdom of our elders. We think of the knowledge that has been passed on. And we know, as Sister Water flows down from the mountaintop, in cooperation with our Mother the Earth, she nurtures that earth, and the flowers, and the plants, and the crops grow. And so, Grandfather, we thank you and we praise you for the gift of our sister, the water.
We're here at the Alameda Springs in Dublin, California, with our beautiful family here. This is my mother. Go ahead, Mom.
We're descendants from the Amador family. We're on this land in the springs My great-great-grandfather lived and owned the property here. The last time I was here, it just brought a whole different perspective on how I felt about the springs and my background heritage.
I say thank you, water, and thank you for raining a lot.
My ancestors, they got on a wagon train in 1844. My great-grandfather was one of their young children. Assuming when they came from Ireland, they thought this valley looked like their homeland of Ireland. And it was green and filled with trees and water. And so I think there were cattle probably in their lives back in Ireland. So they decided they were going to do cattle ranching here in Dublin. I do recall my mom and my grandmother probably swimming in the Alameda Springs, because that was the watering hole. That's where all the kids would go when it was really hot. And they would jump in and cool off. I'm incredibly grateful that it was there. I believe God put it there for a reason. It was the place that everything started. And it fed Mr. Amador. And from Mr. Amador, I went to Mr. Doherty and to all of my relatives. And from that, sprouted all of us living there and eating off the land and taking care of the land. Thank you for your beautiful self, for being there for all of us, that we have life, because I'm grateful.
When we first started on the project, we were informed by the city that the old Shoemaker Naval Hospital was on this location, and we should expect to run into some old construction debris, and sure enough we did.
We had 4,000 beds in that hospital. That's a lot of patients. It started when I was young, when my brother was killed, and well, his plane was shot down, and in the Mediterranean, and no survivors, and nothing that could be done, and nothing that anybody could do, because but that was not unusual, during the war. It was wartime, and it was very hard to accept. Please hope we never have to go to war again. And to talk to those young men that had been in the worst part of the war and were able to go home. That was the big part. And I was able to do it.
My name is Raina Whitney, and I moved into Dublin on November 3rd, 1960. And the reason that I moved to Dublin was because my husband was a building contractor. These two gentlemen bought all the property that encompasses Dublin in an effort to start a new development. They wanted their builders, my husband and his brother, Whitney Brothers Construction Company, to move to Dublin to build this new development for them. The first move-in day, it was November 3rd, 1960, Vulcan McLean had a great big campaign of advertising for these new houses. So the first 40 people that signed up for a new house were all told to use only Mayflower vans. And they all came down Highway 580 from Oakland with big signs on the side that said, "Moving to San Ramon Village, country quiet and city close." They were building at the rate of 10 houses a day and selling just as fast. A city can't be born without water.
So my family's from India. Both my parents are Indian. I was born and raised there. And my parents moved to Africa. And then after that, I lived in India for many years. And then I lived in Israel for 2 years. And that's where I met my husband, who is from the Bay Area. And then we got married and I moved here. He finished his master's and had to work for the government, so we had to live in this area. My husband is Persian American, so his parents are from Iran. Amador Elementary. The Walnut Creek, Kaiser at Walnut Creek. Yeah. Your brother was born there too. I mean, there's such significant shortage of water in India. And, you know, I mean, this week it's so hot, unusually hot, that right now, I mean, it's 100 degrees in pretty much most of the country. So people are really concerned about water. But having said that, you see waters near temples, you see waters near places of worship, you see in older architecture, you see water in the middle of the house, you know, so the house would have a courtyard. There would be water in the middle. And then pretty much most holy places, most places of worship, like Sikh temples, they have water around it. Baha'i temple, Baha'i house of worship in Delhi has water around it. Hindu temples, we have to take your shoes off, then you go wash your hands, you do your ablutions, just like in Islam, you wash your hands and your feet and your face before you say prayers. And then you get to have fun in the pool too. And you know, in a hot day, you jump in and you're like, God, I got lucky today. Yes. Thank you for water.